Okay. All right. So, happy Wednesday, everyone. Today we're going to delve into the art of visual metaphor. Looking to cover it's a myriad of things, including the use of metaphors in advertising, an understanding of pure metaphors, and what the difference between a pure metaphor and a fused metaphor is. And we'll look at some case studies. Then I'll introduce you to a new tool called the Visual Quadrant, which will be an aid for creating ideas and creating metaphors. And we'll look into variants of metaphors, including visual puns, visual irony, visual similes, and visual amplification. All right, so those are the aspects that we're going to cover. So effectively, if you're looking to jazz up your design campaigns or design projects, then you might want to consider using metaphors, as it's a useful, a very helpful literary device that can enhance engagement through the simple use of memorable and effective visual statements. It's the visual equivalent of the narrative version. A narrative metaphor and a visual metaphor are very much the same thing. It uses language in the same way. So what is a metaphor? So a metaphor, in its narrative perspective, is a figure of speech which describes an object or action in a way that isn't literally true, but helps explain an idea or make a comparison. Take, for instance, love is the battlefield. Love really isn't a battlefield. It's just a figure of speech in the same way that Bob is a couch potato. Bob really isn't a couch potato. We can't possibly be. But it's a figure of speech implying that he rarely gets up off the couch. So the best way to demonstrate that is to show you the use of metaphors in advertising. So if we take some memorable campaigns like Red Bull gives you wings. Red Bull doesn't really give you wings. It might give you energy in the same way that the Budweiser campaign, King of Beers, the beer isn't really a king, but it's making an association with that status. And the same can be said for a car company claiming to be the American heartbeat of America, as in this Chevrolet campaign. So metaphors call upon the viewer's imagination to how they interpret wings, a king, or a heartbeat. This engages their minds and attention in a different way. And the secret is to kind of like understand how to use metaphors in a powerful way. Yeah, is that a question?
I was just sorry, I forgot to put in the code, the signing code for Beacon.
Oh, okay. Do you want the can I give you that at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've agreed that Red Bull will wake you up, Budweiser tastes great, and Chevrolet drives well. So in short, visual metaphors liven up your copywriting and prevents it from becoming monotonous and boring. But then there are different terminologies that are often used, then add a degree of confusion. So I'm just going to clarify what some of the differences are between a metaphor, a simile, and an analogy. Okay. So a simile is a metaphor, but not quite as clever or poetic. It makes a comparison using like and as, whereas an analogy or analogies, you can combine metaphors and similes to create an analogy. Let's break it down. Let's take, for instance, life is a box of chocolates. That's a metaphor. But then if you say life is like a box of chocolates, that's making a simile, making a comparison, rather than replacing one expression for the other. And an analogy is life is like a box of chocolates, but with the addition of you never know what you're going to get. It's creating an analogy in that expression. I know that sounds subtle, but it can have an impact on your understanding of metaphors. So an analogy is a comparison between two things, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. Think of metaphors as coming in two varieties. We have pure metaphors and we have fused metaphors. A pure metaphor is something that stands in for the benefit or the feeling we get from the product. We build an association with that product through using a metaphor to help explain how we're feeling. So, for instance, this is a good idea for when your product is either intangible or is when it's boring to look at or complicated or obscure, or when everybody else is in your category doing something like show a car, for example, and you want to do something different. So we use metaphors on various levels. Sometimes we use a pure metaphor to simply help our product stand out from its competition. Take, for instance, the galloping horse, the stallion for Ferrari. Ferrari are saying that they breed racehorses. What they're saying is that they make a product which enjoys familiar qualities and similarities to that of a racehorse. So that's what you call a pure metaphor. Whereas a fused metaphor, which is actually more common, is one where you take the product and fuse it with something else. Combining two cliches, you could symbols or aspects of a situation into one new image. Of the fused metaphor, there are two variants, and that is an additive or addition, and also a substitute. And addition is adding something to an image. So, for instance, you have this Rubens statue of the thinking man. On its own, it's not a metaphor. It literally is a statue of a thinking man. However, if you add something to it, like a headline and a mechanical key, and the headline reading mechanism of the mind, you've then turned it into a fused metaphor of the addition variety. You've not changed anything about the properties of the image. You've added something to the property of the images. Same goes for this ripe tomato. By adding something to the image, you can then change its meaning. So, for instance, if you wanted to give out a message or say something about genetically modified food, and you wanted to use, say, a surgeon's kind of like scar tissue on the tomato, or imply that there has been some kind of modification taking part, then that becomes an additive metaphor. Nothing else about the tomato has changed. You've added things. So that's fused metaphor type number one. And then you've got the second of the two, which is substitute, which is replacing part of the image with something else. Take, for instance, this image here. You've substituted what would be in the hand with a little miniature guitar, implying that it's like having the real thing in the palm of your hand. So you've substituted something there. Here, this image is, this ad is representing that the tennis player has a speed of something like 190 miles an hour in his serve, which is the same way as saying he has one of the most powerful serves on the circuit. And it's like a grenade being thrown at its opponent. What you've done here is you've substituted the tennis ball with a grenade. Here, this Korean TV station, News One, what it's trying to tell its viewers is that by tuning into us, you're able to get to the very front of the action. We bring you into the middle of the action through our TV and news coverage. What's been substituted here is obviously the viewer, the camera has been substituted for the TV viewer. What I want to do is take you on a journey of how to make a metaphor. But first, just want to carefully explain that metaphors translate really well visually, although they do have their roots in narrative, but they are perfect for visual translation. And there's many design campaigns that use metaphors for stunning effects. What you need to do is always ask yourself what's special about your product or what's special about your service, because there lies the clue as to what type of metaphor you use and how you will use a metaphor. Let's say we have a client and they make tires. What we have to ask is, okay, but what's special about your tires? That would be a starting point in the creative process. They might answer, it's a tire with grip, or maybe extra grip. So then we would say, it's a sticky tire. Then we ask ourselves, what else is there that is sticky? So we've got sticky tape, we've got sticky gum, we've got octopuses with sticky tentacles. And so we're playing around with our visual metaphors, see which one could become a surrogate for the message that we're trying to portray. And then before you know it, we may have some creative solutions combining those two images into one complete image. So we've got the image of the tire juxtaposed with the tape holder. And we've got a headline in the corner there reading sticky tires. But equally, we could have gone the octopus route and done gripping performance. So again, all we're doing is we're just mixing our images together to make one new complete message or expression. Here's another example. What about our client is, they make a dairy product, butter. But what's special about this butter is that it's made with sea salt. Where do we go? So first of all, we look at the product, nothing visually different to that than most any other butter. You'd look at the context of this thing about sea salt. After all, it's the special aspect of it. And then we look at the harvesting of salt. Then we might look at the ocean itself. And we're just looking for the smoking gun. We're looking for some clue that could be used to bring the sea, the ocean, salt, and butter together. On occasion, something like a eureka moment might happen. And I'm sure you've all been in a posh restaurant where you get those butter curling knives. And then look at the shape of the curled butter and look back at the crest of the wave of the ocean. And then you bring them together with a simple headline, butter made with sea salt. And there you have it. That's what you call a eureka moment in visual communication. So let me introduce you to a tool which I think will become indispensable for you, not just throughout your studies, but an aid throughout your entire career. And it's called the Visual Quadrant. And it's a really good way of breaking down the needs of the project whilst making connections, visual metaphors. And what you've got to do is you've got to be quite disciplined about this. So let's say we have another client and they are the event organizers for an outdoor arts exhibition. And we pull up our visual quadrant, which effectively is a sheet of paper divided into 4 quarters. And in the top left-hand corner, we want to write down associations and properties, physical associations with that project. Whereas in the top right-hand corner, you would write down associated items, like what other things are used with that product or that event. And then the bottom left-hand corner, you might focus on behaviors or uses. And what does it do? What do you do with it? And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'd actually write down lots of cultural associations. Now, that can include movies, it can include books, it can include TV shows, anything that is current, topical, or even historical. Once you've completed that quadrant, you then have all the information you need. It's like a complicated, elaborate spider diagram where you're making connections. But we go back to the project in hand and we break down outdoor art exhibition. What we do here is in properties, we say landscape, we say sunshine, open, weather, and then in the associated items, we'd say things like bees and lakes and flowers, sky, birds, land, butterflies, anything that you can think of that's associated with the theme. And then behavior, we maybe write down words like, well, it's a festival, it's gardening, pleasure, climbing, hiking, picking flowers, planting, jogging, adventure. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you think about cultural associations, maybe organic food, freedom, global warming, preservation. And then when you've done that, and only when you've done that, can you then visualize by way of an elaborate storyboard, something that can help you draw out a eureka moment. And that's just one of the 3 quadrants that we would be doing for this project, because that's just our attempt to bring out word associations with the word outdoor, whereas the next word is art. So this would be populated in the way that you see on the screen. So we've got, for art, we've got kind of landscapes, color, contrast, shade, form, and then associated items, canvas, oil paints, pencils, brushes, easels, palettes. And then for behavior, we've got shape sculpture, pleasure, storytelling, decorating, observing, painting, relaxing. And then cultural associations, we've thought of artists like Van Gogh, Constable, Picasso, Monet, Dali, Da Vinci, Warhol. So that's just for art. And then we can visualize it. So now we have 2 mood boards, but we're not done yet, because what do we have to say about exhibition? So here the properties are tour, quiet, viewing, collecting, gathering, studying, contrast. Whereas associated items, we've got gift shops, frames, museum catalogues, entrance, gallery, exit, tour guide, tickets, gift shop. And then behavior, we've got gathering of people, pleasure, friends, buying, observing, learning, and creating. And then cultural associations, instead of artists, we've got exhibitions like the Louvre, or the National Gallery, Victoria and Albert, the Guggenheim, British Museum, Tate Modern, etc. Then we can visualize that. So now we have our 3 quadrants, which we then bring together for our ideas. And if you follow this procedure, you will always find that the solution to the creative problem is on one of those pages or a combination of all 3. So let's say we've done that, and now we're kind of like filling in the details, almost like adding ingredients to a recipe. So you're looking a little bit deeper into things where you need a bigger mood board, more paper, bigger size so that you can spread out. And we're looking at the associations with outdoor, with flowers and painting and sculpture, all in one mood board here, in hope that we at some point can connect the dots. And we are starting to connect the dots because something has just happened here that could be a eureka moment, because it was the oil paints and the flowers that caused the event for flowers and the paints to come together, not in any other way other than a composition, a juxtaposition. And the eureka moment was just this simple arrangement. This is almost Gestalt psychology in play, where the juxtaposition of items can add more meaning to the overall piece. So now we have a sunflower made up of tubes of paint. Turning on the side, and we can see where this is going. And then before you know it, we have the finished poster. So the outdoor art exhibition, where the flower represents outdoor, the tubes of paint represent art, and the whole thing is for the purpose of an exhibition anyway. And there you have the finished project. So let's say our next client manufactures a fast, luxurious car that is supple and aggressive. Let's say it's the BMW. Now, here's a question. What else is fast, supple, and aggressive? How about naming an animal with similar qualities? A leopard has similar qualities: supple, fast, and aggressive. So that could be the clue to the metaphor that we use. And indeed, if you look at details of the car, you'll notice that there's no accident in some of those fine details representing some of those similar qualities. And it becomes the campaign. All it needs is a fusion of both the leopard and that detail on the BMW to form one complete message. So now it's saying that that BMW is fast, supple, and aggressive. So what if our car was smaller, but with a big engine? And it's the Peugeot 206RC, which is stands for rally car. Generally, they are beefed up smaller cars. It's a car with lots of muscle. We could also say it's a small car that gives you muscles, one that gives you extra muscle. And this is actually an ad campaign by that. And that's the strapline, the 206 RC, the car that gives you extra muscle. So let's now think not product, but a campaign to advocate towards something that we care about. Let's address the issue that fashion kills more victims than you might think. And what can we do about it? And what do we have to play with? So this is a campaign put out by the World Wildlife Fund. And they want to raise awareness of the consequences of the fashion industry and its impact on wildlife. But who or what are the real victims? The actual animal itself. A family of leopards come in many sizes. You've got baby cubs, you got mum and dad, and you've got siblings. Then ask ourselves, what else comes in many sizes? Clothes, where through the power of additive fused metaphor, you've taken the same picture and you've added the size labels. And now you're really getting the message, especially when it's saying fashion claims more victims than you think. Quite powerful, don't you think? So that's the fused metaphor and the kind of and the two variants, the additive and the substitute. But then there are these other terms which we'll look at, and they slightly mean different things to the ones that we've just looked at. Take, for instance, visual pun. A visual pun is a word or phrase that has two different meanings. So I want to test your ability to spot the visual pun. So what I want you to do is add a word to what you see to create the pun. So you have an ass here. What would be the word that you would add to the word ass to imply a visual pun? Well, I'll give you this one for free. This one would be smart ass. So that's a visual pun. Try this one then. Eyeball, correct. Eyeball. Take this one. Anyone spot the visual pun? So what? Just describe it. So you've got a gun, a trigger made out of, well, there's something wrong with the trigger. It's using the power of substitute, by the way. Looks like a lock of hair, and then we would have hair trigger. Looking at the image, which is obviously a morphing of two elements to create one visual pun. Crab apple, very good. You're really getting it now. And this one is, yes, it's a pun, but it's also a play on words. Again, all you've got to do is just observe, analyze the image, and see what's peculiar about it, which could be a clue to what the pun is. Correct. Well done. Yeah, assault and battery. And this one, anyone? Scotch on the rocks. Well done. And this one, again, if you're looking at the image, you're seeing what's peculiar about it and why it might be a clue. Did you say subwoofer? As in submachine and woofer. Very good. See, already you're now masters of metaphor. And this one, bread knife. A knife made out of bread. Correct. And this one, correct, fire drill. And this one, home run. Got you on that one. And this one, again, just describe the image in your own words, and then think of the words that you might have used in describing it more fully. So it's a trash can full of white items. Have you noticed? The pun is white trash. It's a pun. This one you should get correct. Brainstorm or brainstorming. Okay. So visual irony is juxtaposing two ideas that communicate opposite ideas. So I'm going to have to illustrate that for you. So take, say, a campaign to reduce diabetes or obesity to the point of damaging public health. Now, what you've done is you've brought in images together to try and explain and expand on a very complicated concept. So you've got sweet cupcakes forming the shape of a crime scene, kind of dead body. So that's called irony, where the items are almost sad by their combination. Same goes here. It's very easy to understand this one. The double barrel shotgun, obviously the message is clear that smoking kills. And then we have visual simile, comparing two things or ideas, usually by saying either like or as. So for instance, this campaign here for Faber and Castell, they make beautiful pencils in richest of colors. This one, a great one, is no one grows ketchup like Heinz. And it's combining, obviously, the base of the ketchup bottle with the leaf of the tomato. Another juxtaposition, another kind of like bringing elements together to create a complete message. When McDonald's introduced takeaway via mobile ordering, they produced this poster, simply reading, "Mobile ordering is here." And you've got mobile phones in yellow phone cases, juxtaposed in a way that they look like French fries. And when Braun introduced their salon straighteners in the Italian market, they also used a juxtaposition, one to represent Italy and to represent the capability of the product turning curly hair into straight hair. And when Nivea introduced their night cream, Play-Doh, forget about all the video games and the downloadable apps for your entertainment. What about old school entertainment? What about, like playing with the product itself, old school and authentic, with a headline, "No loading time." So simple message here is that an unwashed vegetable can become a deadly weapon. Visual amplification is what you call expounding on an idea for clarity and emphasis, or to exaggerate a point. So take, for instance, this campaign for Floss Tech, which is sun care cream, quite powerful, 50% proof, and is using the power of exaggeration to exaggerate and emphasize its key feature. Simple message here is so powerful that it's practically like a giant sunshade for anyone who uses it. This one for Listerine, headline reading, "What will your mouth go through today?" So again, this is exaggerating the points, expounding on the selling feature of the product. Metaphors work really well when you've got a good headline to work with them as well. Bear that in mind. What will your mouth go through today? This one here for WMF knives. Sharper than you think. The WMF Grand Gourmet Knife with durable steel. So Shakespeare was right all along. If you think about it, when he said that all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. Full of metaphors. And in many ways, Shakespeare invented the narrative metaphor that we use today in the English language. This is why, compared to most other cultures, we as graphic designers and visual communicators, we're more confident, very confident in using visual metaphors because of the way that we use our language, because we're always using similes and metaphors. This is why it's very difficult sometimes to translate English, because we say weird things as complete sentences where we would expect each other to know them. They're called common idioms, and those idioms are kind of part of our kind of unique English culture. But it extends not just from our writing and our poetry, but also our visual arts and our visual communication. So enjoy playing the visual metaphor game, because I think you're going to have a lot of fun. So let's test your knowledge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some ads from the Absolute campaign. I want you to be able to tell me whether that ad is either a substitute, an additive metaphor. Anyone? Give it a guess. You've got 50-50 chance of getting it right. Anyone online? All right, so let's just break it down. It's a bottle that hasn't had any major modification. You could say that all it's got is the Alka-Seltzer in it, so it's been added to it. There wouldn't have been anything else inside that bottle that is being substituted by the Alka-Seltzer. So we must be talking about something that was added. So this is an additive metaphor. What about this ad, where its title is Absolute Attraction? Additive or substitute? Substitute. And what is it that's been substituted? Yeah, so the light bulb, because the term is like attracted like moth to light, would be a traditional light bulb and all the moths. So that's a substitute metaphor. So final thoughts. Use these devices, metaphors, similes, analogies, very carefully. When used strategically, they can be very powerful, but they can also be perceived as overcomplicated and confusing in the wrong hands. So it does come with a degree of responsibility. So use them responsibly, and then you'll be able to use them more wisely as a result. I do believe just introducing you to these kind of like the principles of visual metaphor and even the language of metaphors, and actually help you to become much more visual metaphor minded. And that's really all I wanted to be able to share with you today without overwhelming you. So we could call this the end, or we could call this the end, or we could call the end like the setting of a sun, or the end of a night out, or the end of the road, or the end as in Life of Brian end, or the end of a relationship, or a big end, or the end of the world, as in the end is nigh. Either way, that's all, folks.